Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for us to have a bit of a discussion today about the newest 5-star resonator that has come to Wuthering Waves. Because boy, oh boy, I've seen a lot of discourse on this unit. And I think the main ones really center around this idea of combat roles, right? And what Lupa actually ends up doing in overall gameplay. One tag that you're actually not going to see on this character's kit is something that a lot of people are, frankly, in my opinion, disappointed by. And that's the fact that main damage dealer as a combat role is not here. And when you keep in mind, right, a lot of things like her character trailer, all of that, people are ending up a little bit disappointed. And I think the thing is that as a whole, right, Lupa fills in a very, very unique archetype on the roster. She is probably the only character in the game that fulfills both a buffing role, which is naturally seen through all of her crazy pack hunt mechanics, as well as, you know, some of her inherent abilities like ignoring 9% to 15% fusion resistance, more like 3 to 15, and then also providing like 18% attack and then 20% fusion. The idea, right, is that she's essentially a sub-in for Shorekeeper on your teams. She's a character that, you know, greatly requires other characters on her team to be able to function, much like Shorekeeper. You're not just gonna like slot her in herself and expect stuff to happen. You're gonna need a main DPS and probably a sub DPS to follow along with that. And the thing is, well, there are some prominent members of the Wuthering Waves community that are, despite some of their prior statements about not being too interested in drama, well, it looks like more drama is being created once again. We got Rexlet over here talking a bit about Lupa and her characterization. Don't have to lecture me about their supposed roles and who's meant to support who. It still doesn't change the fact that Lupa's kit doesn't live up to her image from the story at all. All that ferocity and battle junkie demeanor. Support. Let me just go ahead and quickly bring up some pieces of glue. This is something that's pretty clear about Lupa, right? She's actually very, very, very focused on team play, having a partner. That's actually the first thing that actually occurs in the story, is her literally asking, after fighting a little bit, right, for Rover to be her teammate. And the entirety of the version 2.4 story is based around her teaming up with Rover. And one of the pivotal moments in her character trailer is right about here, where her teammate literally abandons her in the middle of the fight, and she is like devastated by it. This is actually the moment in her story where she decides to like leave the Bow of Legions. This happens right before the story quest. And the idea is that she's always in these sort of like 2-on-2 battles. That is exactly what happens across the entire first half of 2.4. And the thing is, she's at her strongest when she is paired up with somebody. Otherwise, she would probably be exclusively competing in those one-on-one competitions that I'm pretty sure Septimont has in their Aegon and all that shit. And then you throw the Echoes in as well that you're fighting alongside. And the thing is, well, a lot of people aren't necessarily happy with that. With the main thing being, Lupa exhibits, I think, all of that ferocity and that battle junkie stuff. She actively talks shit about enemies in combat. Like, she'll hit them with her forte and then, like, start giggling. She'll parry them and then start yawning. So the characterization is there. It's simply, literally, the damage numbers that have people freaking out. Because let's be honest here, when a character is giving buffs that are essentially supposed to make her equivalent to Shorekeeper, buffs that are essentially best in class for the fusion archetype, well, if she did damage as well that was comparable to Brant or comparable to Chang Li, while also simply supporting on the side and granting buffs to the entire team, do you want to know what that would be, ladies and gentlemen? That would be power creep. If she also did the same exact damage as Brant while providing the buffs that she actively does. And the thing is that when it comes to her kit design, I think it's fair to say she fits pretty well with the characterization that she's had in the story so far. And if anything, the fact that she's more of like a support makes everything that she went through in the version 2.4 second half of the story, right, where she goes on a bit of a solo adventure, that kind of makes it a little bit more significant as well, where, you know, she actually has to do everything by herself, and that makes it, I think, a very pivotal piece of her characterization in that story. I'm not trying to lean into too many spoilers over there. She has a bit of a solo journey in the second half of 2.4. I think this really helps dispel the idea, the myth of this whole waifu versus meta thing, right? The doom posting that we're seeing over here. People aren't pulling characters in these games because of the visual aesthetics. That's just really it. People will tell you all the time, oh, I just want to pull this character because she's so pretty. She's the #1 waifu. Guys, if that character doesn't deal damage, they're not pulling them. It's a lie. This whole idea of waifu versus meta is a complete fucking myth. Do you want to know why so many people are interested or were interested in Cartithia? It's because she looked like she did a lot of damage. And now that people are seeing, right, that Lupa's a bit more of a support, and perhaps most importantly of all, a specific support that only works with a couple of other characters, namely the fusion ones, well, that's where stuff like this is going to come out. Where we're going to have prominent CCs for the game basically bastardizing, and let's be honest here, Rexlin is bastardizing the shit out of her story to essentially stay that she doesn't at all fit what Kuro Games has shown us so far. We'll just pull up a story playthrough. What do you do with Lupa across this story, ladies and gentlemen? Let's see here. Oh, you fight with her. Literally the entire time. If you're not fighting with her, you're investigating. And I guess look what else she does as well. She doesn't just fight with you in this part of the story. She's also fighting with Cartithia during her part of the story. The entire time. You got Cartithia right over here in the same section of the story. She's always literally with somebody. She is the opposite of a lone wolf. She's literally at her worst when she doesn't have a teammate or somebody with her. And that is probably one of the most accurate reflections of her actual gameplay as a whole. And the thing is, you can be upset, I think, at some parts of her design. I think you can be upset with the fact that she's not necessarily the most freeform unit. You can be upset with the fact that her signature and stuff like that are very, very, very specific, and they specifically only buff other fusion characters. But the thing is that if we're going ahead and we're actively misconstruing her entire characterization just because we're upset that she doesn't power creep the shit out of the game by also dealing a massive amount of fucking damage on top of being one of the best buffers in the game, I'm not really sure what we're necessarily doing here. Do we just want to create this narrative that we only want characters that are going to come in, shake up the meta by dealing a fuck ton of damage, and that's how we want characters to be pulled? If that's the case, ladies and gentlemen, then this game will actually just turn into Honkai Star Rail. This game will just turn into one where you're only pulling the newest characters, not because of their characterization, not because of how well they're integrated into the story, but because of the fact that they'll just do more damage than the previous ones. And if anything, I'm surprised that we're not doing things like supporting more unique design like this, because what it does is it allows older members of the roster to still have a place in the game. Because boy, oh boy, are there a lot of characters in a lot of gacha games, and I'll say this as well, PGR included, that are actually legitimately useless right now. People say that PGR has, you know, it's like the best gacha game ever. That game has one of the biggest fucking issues with power creep the genre has ever seen. Sure, they spend years to power creep a character, but they still literally do it. They just make sure they like look at their list to see how long it's been since a character's released, and they're like, all right, it's been 2 years for this one. Let's just release a better version of them that deals double their damage. And that is like how PGR works. They replace an older character, the new character deals double the damage of the old one, and then everyone's like, hey, it's been a year, it's fine, no big deal, everybody. And what that's led to is that 70% of PGR's current roster is actually just not used at all. They're actually like not playable. And so to go ahead and doom post design like this, where Lupa isn't the strongest character in the game, where Lupa isn't a must pull, where Lupa isn't going to change everything for your account, but she instead uplifts other characters, I mean, it's a little bit rough. And to intentionally be this close-minded when it comes to her characterization, this either is just like, okay, you only paid attention to the parts of the quest that you wanted, and you just decided to like not see everything else going on. I don't know, man. I don't know. So yeah, I would say it would be pretty wise for us, I think, as a community, as Wuthering Waves players, to express, right, that Lupa isn't a main DPS. Lupa isn't somebody that's meant to enter the field, do a fuck ton of damage, and be like sort of like that solo carry that's taking every single buff from every single teammate and then performing because of it. She's somebody that's not a lone wolf. She hunts literally in a pack. That's why her, her kit is all about teamwork and stuff like that. And when that's all she's done in the story, ladies and gentlemen, what are we out here saying that she doesn't fit her characterization? That'll be my take on the whole like Lupa situation over here. I personally think that she's one of the most well-designed units in the game from the perspective of she's not a must pull, and then she makes other lesser used units stronger. And I think most importantly of all, right, she doesn't power creep and destroy the balance of the fucking game, because otherwise you get releases like Hyacinth, you get releases like Tribby, where being the sustain in games like Honkai Star Rail, being the support, the damage buffer, isn't enough. They also need to deal a fuck ton of damage on top of it. And to Doompost the unit because they don't break the balance of the game, that has to be one of the silliest fucking things that I've ever seen, frankly, to be honest. And I don't even think this unit is like that much of a must pull either. I think most people should actually skip her. And frankly, that's a good thing in a game like this. And when it comes to Lupa being a support, there's one beneficial thing that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. And that's the fact that because most of her strength is based off of her ability to buff other characters, you don't actually need crazy investment like this for her to work very well in your teams, right? You can invest a lot in her echoes and stuff like that, invest a lot in her substats, but the damage increase that you're gonna get from that isn't gonna be as high as simply going ahead and activating her kit properly. That makes her, in a lot of ways, a budget-friendly unit for some individuals as well, because hey, maybe you don't need the craziest double crit and attack substats to make the unit work, unlike certain DPS characters that she might be paired with. And so there are benefits, right? There are pros. I think most of the people in this situation, they're mainly talking about the cons. Hopefully that sheds some light on the whole crazy Lupa situation that we have going on over here. I think that a lot of people should really, give this character a bit more of a chance. And if they're not willing to, build a team that suits her, I mean, what are you necessarily expecting? Where a unit has heavy synergies with other units and then you don't want to pull the units that they have synergy for. This is like pulling a Jeja when you don't have a Carlotta or a Jinxie. What are you going to do? What is this unit going to do on your teams if you don't pull the DPS that they're supposed to work with? This is like pulling a Phoebe, wanting to play her in confession mode and then not pulling a Zani. This is like pulling a Rosia and then not having Camellia, not having a basic attacker on your team. It's kind of just like, well, you're not really going to do frankly much. And that's just really what it's like. And so if you're not going to pull her team, she's not a DPS, you're not going to get that many results out of her. I don't know why people are that surprised. That'll be that. Let me know what you all think about this one. Peace.